Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Chicago Fire sets up contentious dynamic between 51's most powerful characters. Chief Dom Pascal, Dermot Mulroney, is not in the best state of mind. The character lost his wife on the eve of their wedding anniversary, so we can't blame him much. A loss of that magnitude would traumatize anyone. The problem is, Pascal's trauma is resulting in dangerous calls being made in the field. One of these upcoming calls will be so dangerous, in fact, that Pascal's predecessor, Wallace Bowden Eamon Walker, will be brought in to investigate. Chicago Fire showrunner Andrea Newman talked about the dynamic of these two powerful men during a recent interview with TV Insider. She made it clear that they will not get along. It's very fraught. Bowden is heading an investigation into what went wrong during a tragic firefight that Pascal was in charge of, Newman explained. So it's contentious. Bowden will be grilling Pascal about his every decision and how things went as wrong as they did. The contentiousness makes sense, given that Bowden initially considered Herman David Eigenberg as a possible 51 replacement. He knows Pascal well enough, but it was evident from the beginning of season 13 that Pascal has a very different approach. These men do not see eye to eye on a lot, and it will result in some heated exchanges. This episode will define the relationship in some pretty emotional and complex ways, Newman added. The showrunner admitted that part of the reason behind killing off Pascal's wife was to push his character to the edge and see how the rest of 51 deals with it. The promo teaser for the March 26 episode makes it clear that there's widespread concern that Pascal has lost his good judgment. Stella Kidd, Miranda Ray Mayo, describes the chief as obsessive, and Herman asks Kelly Severide, Taylor Kinney, what should be done if Pascal doesn't snap out of his current funk. The fact that these questions will be raised before Bowden even arrives says a lot about how precarious the situation is for Pascal and his future with 51. There was some debate as to whether Dermot Mulroney would stick with Chicago Fire long-term or serve as a transitional chief between Bowden and whoever takes the role over from Pascal. Mulroney is one of the biggest stars the show has ever had, and depending on how well his character rebounds following the Bowden conflict, he may not make it to season 14. Enjoy Pascal while you can, is our suggestion. The heated tension in the Firehouse was palpable, a simmering pot of emotions, just waiting to boil over. Station 51 had always been a tight-knit unit, but today the air felt different. With each passing moment, the stakes grew higher, and every word, every glance, was charged with an intensity that suggested things were about to get very complicated. A contentious dynamic had taken root between two of 51's most powerful figures, Captain Matt Casey and Lieutenant Kelly Severide. Their usually complementary roles within the Firehouse now stood at odds, creating an atmosphere thick with unspoken challenges. It all began with a call. A high-risk building collapse, the kind of job that would test anyone's skill and resolve. As always, Matt Casey was the first to step up. With a deep breath, he gathered his team, laying out a plan with confidence. We'll enter through the east side. We'll use the ladder truck to reach the higher levels. Everyone stay focused, and make sure you keep the comms clear. Severide stood at the edge of the room, arms crossed, listening intently, his sharp eyes calculating every detail. Unlike Casey, Severide had a more tactical mind. His instinct was to think outside the box, a trait that had earned him a reputation as one of the best rescue divers and fire specialists in the city. But this time, something didn't sit right with him. Casey's plan was solid, but it lacked the nuance Severide believed was necessary for a situation like this. Casey, Severide spoke up, his voice smooth but assertive, I think we need to reassess the entry strategy. I've seen buildings like this before, and there's a risk of the structure collapsing further with the weight. We might be walking into a trap. Casey's gaze flickered to Severide. He knew Kelly's expertise and respected it, but there was something in Severide's tone that made him feel as if his authority was being challenged. I hear you, Severide, Casey said, his voice tight. But the plan stands. I'm captain here and we're moving forward. A slight edge in his voice betrayed his frustration. Severide, never one to shy away from speaking his mind, didn't let the challenge slide. You're captain, yeah, Severide replied, stepping forward with a sense of measured confidence. but that doesn't mean you're always right. I'm telling you, there's a better way." The room fell silent, the team exchanging uncomfortable glances as the tension between the two men grew more palpable. The Firehouse had always been a place of trust, of unity, but today it felt fractured. Everyone could sense that something deeper was brewing beneath the surface. Matt's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists as he kept his cool. "I said the plan stands, Severide. If you have a better idea, you can present it, but until then, we're doing it my way." Kelly didn't flinch. His posture was straight, but the determination in his eyes was unmistakable. He was no stranger to backing down, but today was different. This wasn't just about the job, it was about respect, about the dynamics within the team that had started to unravel over the past few months. There had been smaller disagreements, subtle shifts in the way they operated, but nothing as direct as this. The silence in the room grew heavier until it was broken by the sound of Chief Bowden's firm voice. "Enough. We don't have time for this." Bowden's presence was a grounding force, but even he couldn't ignore the tension that had settled in the air. He turned his gaze between Casey and Severide, his usually unflappable demeanor shifting slightly. "We're going with Casey's plan for now. We'll reassess on site. Now let's get moving. The clock is ticking." But even with Bowden's intervention, the damage was done. The rift between Casey and Severide had been exposed, and no matter how much they tried to mask it, the friction was clear. As they geared up and headed to the trucks, the unspoken rivalry between the two men lingered like a dark cloud hovering over the team. Out on the scene, the pressure intensified. The building was a mess, charred, unstable, and teetering on the edge of collapse. As they moved into position, the dynamic between Casey and Severide became even more obvious. Casey barked orders, taking the lead with his usual confidence, but Severide hovered close by, offering suggestions in a quieter, more insistent tone. "Captain, I think we should secure the west side first. If we don't, we'll lose access to the rear exit." Casey shot him a quick, almost dismissive glance. "We're not splitting forces, Severide. Stay with the team." Severide clenched his jaw, frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. He knew the risks, knew what needed to be done to save lives, but Casey's rigid command structure didn't allow for flexibility. The stakes had never been higher, and the idea of sticking to the plan without considering new intel felt like a gamble Severide wasn't willing to take. With a sharp nod, Severide took the initiative. He signaled to his team and started to move in the direction he knew would give them the best chance. He knew the risks, but sometimes the best decisions were the ones that weren't easy. Back at the command center, Bowden watched the situation unfold with growing concern. He could see the division between Casey and Severide, and it troubled him. They were two of his most trusted officers, but if this conflict wasn't addressed, it could jeopardize the whole operation. He needed to get to the root of the issue before it escalated further. As the team worked to save those trapped in the debris, the tension between Casey and Severide remained ever-present. Their differing leadership styles clashed, but ultimately it was Severide's approach that paid off. His decision to reassess the entry point saved several lives, and though Casey begrudgingly acknowledged the success, the unspoken rift between them grew. Back at the Firehouse, after the adrenaline of the rescue had worn off, the two men found themselves alone in the locker room. The silence was thick, neither willing to break it. Finally, Casey spoke, his voice low but firm. "You don't get to undermine me in front of my team, Severide. I'm the captain, you respect that." Severide's response was quiet, but there was a sharpness to it that spoke volumes. "I respect you, Casey, but I don't always agree with you. And sometimes you need to listen when people have something to offer." Their words hung in the air, unresolved, as both men stood, locked in a stare. The Firehouse, once a place of camaraderie and trust, had become a battleground. A contentious dynamic had formed, one that would continue to shape the future of Station 51.